Tonight we're taking a detour from our normal topics and beginning with a deep dive into a topic that will touch each and every one of us in some way. Cancer. It is a terrifying word, but there are fascinating advances in the fight against it, some of them happening right here in Portland, much of it inspired by the brilliance of a local doctor. And that is our big story tonight. The doctor's name is Brian Druker. He's a medical doctor who grew up in Minnesota, went to medical school in California, and started his research career there. Here is the lab group he worked with. This picture from 1985. That's Druker with the white shirt and tie. In 1993, OHSU recruited him to come to Portland and open a lab focused on targeted therapies for cancers. It was there that he found a compound that would zero in on a genetic mutation in the cells that cause a specific type of leukemia called CML. The problem was the leukemia cells kept dividing because a molecular switch was stuck in the on position. Dr. Druker found a drug that would target those cells and close that switch, while at the same time leaving healthy cells alone. It became a drug called Gleevec. Here he is talking about it back in 2010.
Hello, my name is Brian Druker from the Oregon Health and Science University Cancer Institute. The topic of my talk today is imatinib, or Gleevec, as a paradigm of targeted cancer therapies. What I'd like to do...
The drug has saved thousands of lives since it was approved back in 2001 by the Food and Drug Administration. Someone with CML now who takes Gleevec and is in remission 2 years after starting treatment is going to live a normal lifespan. That just didn't happen before. I had a chance to catch up with Dr. Druker recently. We talked about that drug and the new era of precision medicine that his discovery launched.
Well, precision medicine is where we started. And that was my own background in the drug I developed called Gleevec, which took a leukemia, had a 3 to 5 year life expectancy, and now patients are expected to live a normal lifespan.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had a question on that. I think people at home wonder, okay, you developed this thing that saved bajillions of lives. Did you get wealthy doing that? How's that work?
You know, the drug, when it came into my lab, came from a drug company, and it had this unusual patent against any tumor in a warm-blooded mammal. So unless we determined that it could treat snake cancer, we saw zero profit from it. And I get no royalties. So no, I didn't get wealthy from that. But the wealth that I have is that at least once a week I get an email in my inbox from a patient who's benefited from this medication. And what a remarkable reward to get an email at the end of a long week that said, thank you for this drug, and here's all the incredible things I've done over the last decade.
Yeah.
And just last week, I was visited by a gentleman from England, 10 years on therapy. He brought me pictures of him skydiving, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and he just wanted to come and thank me. I can't think of anything more rewarding than that.
Yeah, it's a wealth of memories. Okay, but I took you off track.
But what we want is we want that outcome for all patients with cancer by trying to match their unique and individual cancer with better treatments and better outcomes. So what we've learned is that we need to analyze tumors in incredible breadth and depth.
And before you go into that, as you're saying that, I'm thinking in the old days, like with chemotherapy, that was basically carpet bombing the body, right?
Yeah, it's exactly the analogy I'd use. It is carpet bombing, it's slash and burn, and it leaves our patients pretty bruised and battered.
Yeah, and so now you're able to target.
Let's look at what distinguishes your cancer cells from normal cells and use that to design a treatment that matches your cancer. But what we've learned over the last 5 to 10 years is cancer is a pretty tough enemy, and we throw something at it and it figures out a way to circumvent it and become resistant. So we've designed a program called SMART with 2 M's because we can't spell, but we're trying to outsmart the cancer by taking a biopsy on treatment and trying to figure out how is it trying to evade and evolve on treatment. So now we can come back and revamp our treatment to try to stay one step ahead of it. And by doing those sorts of testing and analytics, we can take people that might have only 6 months to live and oftentimes they'll be getting years. So we're adding years to people's life, but now we want to move that up earlier, where we think we could actually think about curing more people with less harm.
How about that? Dr. Druker is still at OHSU, by the way. He's the CEO of the Knight Cancer Institute. More about that in a bit. With Gleevec, though, he found a way to give thousands of people that new lease on life. He joked with me that he now tells those patients something like, well, yes, you are going to die someday, but not from this. One of his focuses, as you just heard, is precision, how to kill cancer cells with very targeted attacks. Another focus is on finding cancer earlier, when it's very small and just beginning.
A decade ago, when I said we need a blood test for cancer at early stages, it sounds a little bit like science fiction. Yeah. And it kind of is. When you follow the science, it's incredible science. But the reality is it's now available to help people and detect cancer at these earliest and curable stages.
Are you able to dumb it down enough to explain to a guy like me how a simple blood test can find a particular cancer?
The way that I explain it, Pat, is if you look at any cell in your body, the DNA in that each cell is 100% identical. But you have a lung cell, a liver cell, a heart cell. So how does that DNA know how to make a heart cell or a lung cell or a kidney cell? And what happens is there's almost like a marking pencil that goes along the DNA and says, we're going to activate the heart program and deactivate every other program. And when you shed some cells or into the bloodstream, we can detect, hey, you had a couple extra drinks last night, and we can see you shed a few extra liver cells into your bloodstream because you killed a couple liver cells. So we can detect those marks in the bloodstream. Similarly, cancer, because it has to grow, divide, survive, spread around the body, it gets very specific marks in the DNA that identify it as a cancer. So now when we take a blood sample, we can tune an algorithm to, is there cancer, yes or no, meaning do those marks show up? And if the answer is yes, we can then go back and say, does that look like it's coming from a liver cell, a kidney cell, or a lung cell? And now we can go back, and if it looks like it's a lung cell, we may do a chest x-ray and see what's there. So it's just an amazing biology of how our bodies grow and develop, and we're just taking advantage of that.
As you can tell, Dr. Druker is not just a scientist and a doctor who sees patients, which he is, he's also someone who thinks big. He inspired and is now running the Knight Cancer Institute, which is a really big deal. 9 years ago, he helped raise $1 billion for the Institute. And it started with this pledge from Nike founder Phil Knight.
I make the following pledge. Penny and I will donate $500 million to OHSU if it is matched in pledges within 2 years in a fundraising campaign.
How about that? Pledges then included $100 million from the late Gert Boyle of Columbia Sportswear, $200 million from taxpayers through the state legislature in Oregon. The rest came from companies, including the Standard and Hoffman Construction, and a variety of smaller donations. Suddenly, Druker had $1 billion at his disposal and a mandate to build out the Knight Cancer Institute to make it the preeminent research center on the West Coast. Druker helped design the building to house the research center. That's where I visited him, and he began recruiting the best talent in the world.
We're now up to 1,500 people that we've brought in. So we've surpassed the goal of 1,000. And again, it's just something I'm really proud of, is that we built a great team here of people that want to make Oregon the place where we end cancer as we know it. And that was what the purpose of the point of the challenge was, and we're living up to that.
And what does, it's obvious to you, but what are some of the benefits of having 1,500 people all together in one campus or one building? Or?
It truly brings a critical mass of people. And I'll tell you a little bit about our early cancer detection program. And we've deliberately designed it to be multidisciplinary. So it's cancer biologists, it's mathematicians, it's engineers, it's computationalists, it's all sorts of different disciplines to try to attack a huge problem to advance the field. And I've always talked about this kind of like a Bell Labs. It's bringing lots of different disciplines together, bringing them and focusing them on a problem, and then watching incredible things happen.
And it sounds pretty easy when you lay it out like that, but I imagine there must be a tremendous amount of pressure for you as sort of the founding force behind all this.
Of course, there's pressure and responsibility, but by hiring great people and letting them create, they do incredible work. And I'll just give you an example. A decade ago, when we started the challenge, we talked about what we really need is a simple blood test for cancer. And working with a company in the Bay Area, we've launched a blood test that can identify 50 different cancers at early stages. And just to give an example of the impact that's had, there was a retired family physician who enrolled on one of our studies. We found an early stage bile duct cancer that typically isn't detected until very late, untreatable, incurable stages. We identified it at an early enough stage he was able to undergo a curative surgery. Those are the sorts of things that are happening here and that we're bringing forward to our communities and to the world.
Okay. I had read about, you had told Laurel a little bit that you were, in 2021, just starting to work with that company.
Yes.
And as I was listening to that, I was worried it was Theranos. Theranos, if you don't know, was a blood testing company founded by this woman, Elizabeth Holmes. It promised its technology could test for cancer and diabetes with just a few drops of blood. It was a fraud, and Holmes is now in prison.
You know, we hear about Theranos all the time, but to give you an example, this is real world data. This is already being tested in 140,000 people in a randomized trial in England to try to establish this as a new benchmark for early cancer detection. The National Cancer Institute in the U.S. has invested in these types of technologies that are real and have real patient benefit. So yes, I understand there's some tarnish from Theranos, but this has real data benefiting real people.
With his team of scientists and others, the Knight Cancer Institute is focusing on research that could help them find cancers even earlier, almost like going back in time.
We're also working on the next generation of blood test. We're looking at other markers that could get shed into the bloodstream, not just DNA, but also proteins that get released by cells, and also tiny little packages of protein or DNA get released by cells every single day. And we're trying to understand how cells communicate with one another. So we're looking at all these signals that our bodies are trying to say, hey, there might be a cancer somewhere, or a signal that something just isn't quite right with the immune system that's trying to identify a cancer. So all these things are happening, and we're trying to track down these signals.
Okay, let's just pause there for a moment to remind you how amazing this work is that he's talking about. He's talking about cells inside our bodies that are incredibly small, and the researchers are not just studying those, they're able to go even smaller to look at what's basically mail that's going between the cells. So does that mean that one day doctors will be able to figure out what cancer we are most likely to get and then help us defend against it?
I think through blood tests, yes, there can be. And I think in the next generation of the sorts of projects that we'll look at, it will be how do cancers evolve over time? And if you think about smoking and the damage it does to the lung, can we detect some of the damage that's going to lead to a cancer, and then maybe could we reverse that? Of course, not smoking would be way better, but we also know that people, even after they stop smoking, will have a slightly higher, 10, 20 years later, still have a higher risk of cancer. Are there things that we could do that might prevent that? But also, I'm afraid as you and I get in a little bit older, there are also other things that we can identify in blood tests that tell us our risk of cancer is going up as we age. Could we think about intervening to reverse that and reset the clock? Maybe then we wouldn't even get cancer in the first place.
Well,
that's the next generation of projects we'll do.
Pretty wild. Tonight we've talked about the future from the 10,000-foot level. Tomorrow night we're going to talk more about the nitty-gritty. How exactly are they making these breakthroughs? I hope you'll join us for that, either live or later. Whatever works for you is fine. And as always, if you have some thoughts and comments about this, send them our way. We'll try to feature them tomorrow night. Have you or a loved one benefited from Gleevec? Has Dr. Druker maybe taken care of you? Do you work there now and you want to tell us about it? We'd love to hear your comments. Send them to our email. The email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you.